Today, we're digging into a topic that is so important but almost never gets talked about out loud. We're looking at what it really takes for a harm reduction nonprofit to survive. And I'm not talking about fancy fundraising dinners. I'm talking about the raw, high-stakes architecture an organization needs just to protect its mission when actual lives are on the line. So let's break down what this architecture of survival really looks like.
And yeah, that quote really sets the tone for us, doesn't it? The stakes could not be higher. The stuff we're covering today isn't some academic exercise. It's a framework born from real crises, and it's designed for defense. It's for organizations out there doing some of the absolute hardest work imaginable.
So, here's our game plan. We're going to start with how these organizations even come to be. Then we'll dive into the wild ecosystem of risks they have to navigate, including why their founders are often so vulnerable. We'll look at what happens when the structure just gives out, and then, and this is the key part, we'll look at a real framework for survival and what it means to truly protect the mission.
Okay, let's kick things off with their origin story. Because you've got to understand, these organizations are not dreamed up in a corporate boardroom with a neat 5-year plan. No, they are forged in the fire of a public health emergency. This right here, this is the absolute heart of it. These groups pop up out of pure necessity. They're started by people with lived experience, people who are responding to incredible loss in their own communities. They start with this simple promise: we're not going to let anyone else die. But that passion, that incredible, world-changing drive is the very thing that can become a massive vulnerability down the road.
So, let's talk about the world these groups have to live in. It's not just challenging. It is a full-blown ecosystem of risks. Risks that, honestly, most traditional nonprofits could never even begin to imagine.
This slide just scratches the surface of the daily chaos. On any given day, you're not just dealing with one thing. You're dealing with all of it. You've got the trauma of overdose deaths. You're serving people who are deeply stigmatized. You're navigating a political minefield, all while trying to figure out federal grants, foundation rules, Medicaid billing, and sometimes the entire operation is literally running on the founder's personal credit card. It's just relentless.
And this example just perfectly illustrates that constant churn. There's no off button. The work is crisis-driven, 24/7. This constant state of emergency means that building out stable internal structures, the boring stuff, always gets pushed to the back burner. But that's a debt that always comes due.
And this brings us to something that's both tragic and deeply ironic. The very person who pours their entire life into building the organization, the founder, is often the one who is most exposed.
And this pattern is just heartbreakingly common. It goes like this. The mission starts to work, which brings in more money and more attention. Well, that attracts new people to the board, right? People who maybe care a little more about spreadsheets than the actual mission. And all of a sudden, those little structural flaws that were there from the start, because the founder was too busy literally saving lives to write perfect bylaws, they get turned into weapons. They're blamed on the founder, and then the founder gets pushed out.
So how does an organization even get to that point? Well, it's almost never one big, dramatic implosion. It's a slow, quiet decay of the very things that were supposed to protect it in the first place.
I mean, just look at this comparison. It is night and day. A healthy board is like a shield. They get it. They govern. They protect the mission. They tackle problems head on. But a failed board? They're basically a ghost. Just a list of names on a piece of paper. They avoid conflict like the plague, and when a crisis finally blows up, their first move is to blame the executive director for the very problems they were supposed to be helping with.
And this leads us to a really hard lesson. In a field built on trust and community, it feels so natural to want to work with your friends. But here's the thing. Friendship is not a substitute for real infrastructure. When you hire your friends, accountability gets blurry. Those really difficult, necessary conversations just don't happen. And that makes the whole mission incredibly vulnerable.
Okay, so we've laid out some pretty immense problems here. But, and this is important, they are not unbeatable. So now let's pivot to the solution, a practical, real-world framework that's built for survival.
So this isn't your typical nonprofit consulting jargon. The source material calls it organizational survival architecture. And you should think of it less as advice and more as a defense system. It's like a set of structural fortifications designed specifically for the high-stakes, crisis-driven reality that these harm reduction groups live in every single day.
And here are the pillars of that architecture. As you can see, it's a really comprehensive approach. It covers everything from completely rewriting the bylaws and restructuring the board to putting in ironclad financial controls and, maybe most critically, protecting the leadership from those exact patterns of removal we just talked about.
And this is where that complexity can just become totally overwhelming. I mean, look at this. A federal grant might say you can't use the money for salaries. A private foundation demands its own specific paperwork. Medicaid has its own super rigid billing codes. And the city contract needs a receipt for every single granola bar you hand out. You're juggling all of this at once. Without a super robust system, it's not a matter of if a mistake happens, it's just a matter of when.
And that leads to this huge mindset shift. For activists who are already overworked, compliance can feel like a burden. It feels like punishment, but it's not. In this environment, solid compliance is your best armor. It protects the mission, it protects the staff, and it protects the founder from being the one who takes the fall for an inevitable mistake.
Which brings us to our final and honestly our most important point. All of this stuff, the bylaws, the financial controls, the board governance, it isn't just bureaucracy for the sake of bureaucracy. It is the deepest form of community care.
Think about it like this. The courage and compassion that start these organizations, that's the fuel. But that fuel needs a strong, well-built engine to turn it into sustainable action. Without that structure, without those boundaries, the best intentions in the entire world will eventually just burn out or get torn apart.
And in the end, all of this hard work, all of this structure, it's for one reason: the community. They're the ones who suffer when a vital organization collapses because of weak governance or some internal fight. They deserve organizations that are stable, that are resilient, and that are built to be there for the long haul.
So we'll end with this question. And it's not just for founders or board members in harm reduction, it's really for anyone involved in mission-driven work. Are you just running on passion and good intentions? Or have you actually built the architecture to make sure that your mission can withstand the pressure and truly last?